all up and going, right? Go live. All right. Hey everybody, I am Jeff Jansen. Today is May 4th, 2018. I may have put March 4th on there by mistake. And we are going to be reading The Go-Giver Influencer by Bob Berg and J. David Mann. Hold on real quick. Okay. So, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to read the back part first, and then we will read the second part. Okay? So, let me get in here. The Go-Giver Influencer. The Go-Giver Influencer, a little story about a most persuasive idea by Bob Berg and John David Mann, best-selling authors of The Go-Giver. Okay? Contents, Chapter 1, Jackson. Let's get over to Jackson. Jackson Hill looked like a man waiting to see the executioner. Okay? Are you sure you won't have some coffee? The young woman at the reception desk had already offered him coffee, a soft drink, and water in that order. I'm good, thanks though. He liked her energy. The nameplate on her desk said Maribel. Perfect, thought Jackson. That's exactly what I need today. A miracle. He glanced at the wall clock. 10 after. 11. Now. It had taken 3 weeks just to get this appointment. 3 weeks he couldn't afford to wait, and now the appointment hour had come, and here he's still waiting. He suppressed the impulse to look at the clock again. After 3 weeks of waiting, another 10 minutes, no 11, shouldn't matter, right? Yes, Maribel was speaking into her headset now. Okay, I'll send him in. She smiled at Jackson and said, Miss Waters, can you see now? It's straight down the hall on the right, finally. As Jackson walked past her desk, Maribel leaned forward a little and spoke in a stag whisper. You're going to love Miss Waters. She's really nice. Jackson hoped that was true. As he took his seat, Jackson noticed a photo on Miss Waters' desk of a young girl, 12 maybe, curled around a beautiful Russian blue cat, looking at the camera with a big solemn eyes that said, This is my cat. Nobody messes with my cat. The elegant blue stared at the camera, too, with haunting green eyes that said, This is my human. Nobody messes with my human. Jackson smiled. Maybe this meeting would go well after all. So the woman said, still looking down at the papers on her desk, Mr. Hall. Hill, said Jackson, already feeling defensive. She looked up. Sorry. It's Hill, Jackson Hill. Of course, Mr. Hill, Jackson. So, she sat back in her chair to give him her full attention. Tell me about your business. Showtime. Sure. So we started with our first line of dry dog food 5 years ago. That was just for dogs. After all, size and age. And then within 6 months, we added a cat line. And he went on, just as he'd rehearsed it, chronicling how over the past 5 years he built his fledgling business into a respected brand. Of course, when he used the words, we started and we added, he was really talking about just himself. Jackson working solo in his cramped little kitchen, late into the nights and over long weekends, experimenting, crafting, adjusting only the purest, as his company motto went, only the freshest, only the best. Jackson had, in every sense, built his business from his kitchen table. Quite the entrepreneur, said Miss Waters. He shifted his seat, unsure exactly how to respond to that. Jackson never intended to be a business owner. All he wanted was to see animals have the best food to eat. He just had to become an entrepreneur in order to do it. 6 years ago, he was working a sales job for an electronics outlet and hating it. Cooking for himself, Walt and salmon. When he shared his natural dog food concoctions with a friend who also lived with dogs, word got out. By the time he let go of his sales job to focus full-time on his pet food line, he had more than 100 customers, and that widely respected brand. All of which could come crashing down exactly 1 week from today if he didn't get this contract. No, not could, and all of which would come crashing down. So he distributed to what now she was glancing down again, running her fingers down the sheet at the top of her little stack of papers. 2 states. 3, he said. Almost 4, he added, and immediately regretted it. Almost 4? What? Like holding 4 fingers up high and proudly saying, these many! You're in business now, Jackie, as Walt would say. You gotta act like it. 3, said Miss Walters, nodding to her papers. Almost. 4. She looked up and leveled her gaze directly at Jackson. So tell me, why do we want to carry you? Jackson winced. He knew she meant to say, carry your product, right? But intentionally or not, she'd certainly nailed it. Hadn't she? If they gave him this contract, they would indeed be carrying him. He took a breath. It's simple, really. I love animals. Adore them. Big, small, 2-day-old kittens, old hounds on their last legs. Doesn't matter what shape or size or breed or temperament to me. They are all, every one of them, the noblest, sweetest, kindest, most authentic creatures. I look at an animal like, he almost said, like your daughter's cat. But would that be getting too personal? Well, like any cat, any dog, and I think they were put here as emissaries of how we ought to be. Emissaries of heaven on earth. Miss Walters smiled cleanly, hence the name. Jackson nodded. Exactly. That's how I see them. She looked down at the papers again. Angels clothed in fur, and up again at Jackson. A somewhat unconventional name for a business. We're a somewhat unconventional business, he said, feeling defensive again. Anyway, as I said, it's simple. I want to reach more animals with the best the earth has to offer. Only purest and freshest. That slogan, I really mean it. And if I can put my product in your store, well, you can reach a lot more creatures than I can on my own. Understatement of the week. Smith & Banks Pet Supply. The chain Miss Waters represented had stores in every state coast to coast. A massive footprint, or should he say paw print. Miss Waters glanced at her papers again, then back at Jackson and smiled once more. That thin smile that didn't seem to give much away. Well, I've looked through the materials you sent, and I have to say, it's impressive. We like it and we like you. We are definitely interested in this possibilities. Jackson's heart leaped. He nearly leaped to right out of his chair. Impressive. We like it and we like you. Wow. Then his head caught up. Hang on. Did she just say definitely, possibly? Wasn't that sort of like saying for sure, maybe? We think angels clothed in fur could sit very comfortably on our shelf, Miss Waters was saying. Just 2 points. You need to supply us on a national basis, of course. And we would want it to be an exclusive arrangement. Jackson's heart stopped. National, exclusive, national distribution. That would mean he'd either have to ship his product clear across the country, which would be impossible because part of his whole thing was their freshness and the emphasis on locally grown ingredients, or he'd have to set up not 1 or 2, but at least a dozen separate production sites, which would take an enormous investment, which was completely out of the question, and exclusive. Pull out of all of his existing client stores. Turn his back on all those relationships. It hurt even to think about it. Okay, he said, his heart racing desperately, hoping that she couldn't see how rattled he was. See, I was hoping to start out going into stores in 4 states, maybe 5. I mean, that's what we're geared for at the moment. I understand, she said, but you understand we're a national chain, providing only the purest, only the best in these 5 states over here, but not in those 5 states over there. Well, would that be fair to our customers? Jackson felt his face flush. Would that be a rhetorical question, he wanted to say, but he bit it back. Instead, he just sighed. Silently, he hoped. No, of course, I see your point, but I don't see how. He stopped. How did he plan to finish that sentence? The silence in the room felt positively chilly. He had to say something, but he didn't dare explain his actual situation. Revenue from those early clients had allowed him to take over an old out-of-business diner with his own industrial kitchen. He had built out his pet food line and extended his sales to stores across the state. To extend that reach farther to cover 3 states, well, parts of 3 states, he'd had to set up a whole new separate production facility in the next state over so he could keep to his standards of freshness and local supply. But setting up and running a new plant from scratch was a lot harder than he expected. The financing he'd gotten to do it was drowning him. The bank had been patient for a year, but now he had to bring his account current or they would call the loan and shut down his operation. A week from today, there was no way under the sun he could come up with the cash. But if he could show up with a large purchase order from a major national company, he was betting that would halt the process and keep his doors open. A contract with Miss Waters' company, in other words, might just save him from going under. And at that thought, an idea slipped into his mind, so quietly that it took him a moment to realize it was sitting there waiting for him. I understand what you're saying, he said. That makes sense. I see that, of course, to scale up on the level, I'd need some assistance. For the first time since his meeting had begun, Miss Waters looked ever so slightly taken off balance. Assistance? Well, said Jackson, the entire continental United States, that's a good deal of territory. Our whole thing is fresh and local. That's more or less the heart of the brand you'd be featuring on your shelves. We need to put it in place a network of kitchens, production centers. We have several now. He had 2, barely, to supply nationwide. We need to set up, a dozen more around the country. I'd expect a dozen at least. That'd take a little financing. He tried to say this all in an entirely neutral, casual tone. Oh, sure, a dozen plants across the country. What was he planning to do anyway? A little financing? Just saying the words nearly gave him a heart attack. I don't mean you'd provide actual funding, he added. That would have to come from my own sources, obviously. But I've never gone into anything on this scale before. The only way it would work, I expect, would be with someone big, someone like Smith & Banks, underwriting it. Guaranteeing the loan, I mean. Miss Waters regarded him with an appraising look. Right, well, I can certainly run that past the corner office. See what they say. But to be honest, Mr. Hill, I don't promise they'll be friendly about the idea. Another chilly silence. Also, you said an exclusive. She raised her eyebrows as if to say, yes. That's a tall order right now. I supply a lot of stores in our area. She said nothing, and a lot of these small stores, these aren't just clients, they're friends, people I've known for years, and without whom his business would never have gotten off the ground. He could have added. Of course, she said, you've got an existing pipeline agreement and contracts. We assume there'd be a transition period, time for you to fulfill your current obligations and gracefully withdraw from future commitments. Work up new marketing collateral for our stores and so forth. Say 3 months? Jackson nodded numbly. Marketing collateral? He hadn't thought about that. Unexpectedly, Miss Waters' voice softened. I know it's a lot. She was silent again for a moment, though this time, somehow, the silence did not feel so chilly. Tell you what, Mr. Hill, she said after another moment, why don't you go back and talk with your people, see what you might be able to work out, and I'll go speak with the corner office here and about that underwriting idea. And then we'll meet again, okay? Say next Friday, a week from today. A week from today, exactly. The words that bank offered had spoken to him that morning, only without the question mark. He stood up, reached over a desk, and shook hands. A week, he said. Thank you. You've got this, Jackson, he told himself as he slipped past Maribel's desk with a nod and mouth thank you. She was on the phone and showed him out the door. You are a successful businessman. You're going to close this deal. But it didn't feel like he was going to close this deal. And he didn't feel like a successful businessman. He felt like a man who just had been seen by the executioner. Gillian will be the next one. We'll read it tomorrow. I'm going to push stop and we're going to start the next book. If I can.